Destruction without warning. Every year, violent earthquakes kill thousands of people. Despite decades of research and the latest technology, seismologists are still not able to detect the deadly threat in time.
I think it's fair to say that most people in the mainstream of seismology do not believe it's possible to do short-term earthquake prediction today.
But the solution might be under the seismologists' noses.
Many snakes hit their heads against the wall until they were bleeding.
To be prepared for the next quake, school children in China learn rhymes to pay attention to unusual animal behavior. But what's the truth behind these anecdotes and legends?
There is no animal, really, that can detect something that we cannot measure.
Only a few scientists are trying to find out how animals can sense in advance the movement of continental plates. These few are observing phenomena to which seismologists don't usually pay attention.
My work is considered controversial by some.
Could animals help to predict earthquakes in future? Japan is situated on the edges of 4 tectonic plates. About 127 million people live in this geological fracture zone, and earthquakes are part of their daily lives. Often, before an earthquake occurs, curious things are observed by the public. A scientist from Osaka University has been collecting these reports.
My name is Chihiro Yamanaka. I am an associate professor at Osaka University. I live in Kobe, and I experienced the big earthquake in 1995. That moment, we had a lot of strange and unusual phenomena. That triggered me. We should study this phenomenon.
In March 2011, it wasn't only pilot whales that behaved strangely. Professor Yamanaka has collected further observations of unusual animal behavior.
A citizen reported that moles and snakes are frozen to death, probably 1 week before the earthquake.
In Taiwan, too, people witnessed strange animal behavior before earthquakes. Although they're considered untrustworthy by mainstream scientists, geographer Jin Hong-jung still compiles these reports.
Many animals behaved strangely before the violent earthquake in 1999. I have collected and interpreted some reports about the animal behavior. Some animals fled the area. Some rescued themselves by moving to higher ground. Others dug themselves into the earth and disappeared. And fish suddenly jumped out of the water and onto land. Yet even to this day, scientific instruments and observations cannot completely register the occurrence of a quake.
In the Italian Alps, locals also registered unusual animal activity shortly before a quake destroyed their villages in 1976. But what is the underlying reason for such behavior? Helmut Tribuch, professor of physical chemistry, has been studying this question in great detail.
As a scientist, I wasn't convinced that these phenomena are real. I also suspected that it could be a psychological reaction of people after the earthquake. But I decided to investigate. I wanted to learn if this is really a natural phenomenon. And that's why I began to study old documents and to interview eyewitnesses.
Professor Tribuch meets 2 farmers from his village. Back in 1976, they observed how their animals suddenly changed their habits.
The cows didn't want to eat anymore. I couldn't do anything. They jumped always back and forth and didn't want to eat. On the next day, the hay was still untouched.
Some cows even strangled themselves. According to my cousin, they were trying to flee shortly before the earthquake. Because they pulled on their chains, they suffocated. All in all, 8 cows died in the barn.
No one can forget such an experience.
Although the animals are warning us, we're not able to interpret their behavior and realize that an earthquake will happen.
Professor Tribuch has visited many countries to collect reports and information from all over the world.
I have never received any kind of public support for my research, and other scientists have experienced the same. In a way, it is only an amateur research we are doing. But as there are so many people dying during such disasters, it would make sense to at least document these phenomena, because to this day, they are not even documented.
The earthquake region of Nanjing is a center for snake farming. For the Chinese, snakes are a delicacy and an important earthquake sensor.
I've worked with snakes for over 20 years, and I'm familiar with their character and behavior.
In 2005, the snake farmer made a cruel discovery: a deadly mass panic in the snake's enclosure.
Many snakes hit their heads against the wall until they were bleeding. They didn't stop. They wanted to escape and run for their life.
4 days later, the earth trembled in this area. It was a relatively harmless quake with a magnitude of 4.6 on the Richter scale. Did the snakes feel in advance something the scientists missed? After the mass panic in the snake farm, researchers have started to install webcams to observe the reptiles around the clock, and already they've discovered a first pattern in their behavior.
Let's take the huge quake of Sichuan in 2008. Normally, snakes eat every 3 to 4 days, but 10 days before the quake, more than 10,000 snakes suddenly stopped eating. After the quake, they surfaced in large groups and moved in circles. At this point, we knew that there will be heavy aftershocks. The next day, we had one with a magnitude of 6.4.
But the authorities never sent out a warning to the people in Sichuan. More than 5 million buildings are destroyed, 70,000 people die under the rubble. Why didn't the behavior of the snakes lead to a widespread evacuation?
We are still not able to make a precise prediction when, where exactly, and how violent an earthquake will be when our snakes show unusual behavior. It is still a long way to go. But the fact that snakes warn us a few days in advance is really useful. There is nothing which is comparable to it.
But what exactly alerted the snakes? A scientist in Germany studies the sensory organs of the reptiles.
My name is Guido Westhoff. I am a zoologist and manager of the tropical aquarium at Hagenbeck Zoo in Hamburg. Snakes don't have outer ears, no eardrum, no ossicle like humans have, but they still have a very well-developed inner ear. For a long time, scientists didn't understand this until they noticed a connection between the inner ear and the lower jaw. This means snakes listen to the ground. And snakes would be stupid if they didn't do that. When I lie on the ground all day long without a possibility to have a perspective from above, how else shall I get information if not from the ground? On the ground, I get information from which direction someone is coming. Does it have 2 or 4 legs? How heavy? How fast is it? Today, we know that snakes get all this information from the vibrations in the ground, and this gives them a clear advantage. The inner ear of a snake sits in the skull, just where we have it too. This is a skull of a reticulated python, and here at the back is situated the inner ear.
Instead of sound waves, snakes are able to record vibrations with their inner ear. Those oscillations are first registered by the underjaw and are then passed on by several ossicles to the inner ear. The time difference between the two lower jaw bones picking up a vibration enables the animal to locate the signal source. This sense of vibration is so sensitive that snakes can detect the slightest tremors, including those which happen before an earthquake. A Chinese propaganda film even claims that scientists were once able to predict an earthquake with the help of snakes sensing the danger. Haicheng in February 1975. Hibernating snakes suddenly left their holes in the middle of winter. According to the film, they painfully froze to death on the blanket of snow. Despite the cold, fish were swimming to the surface. One could catch them by hand without any difficulties. In addition, slight foreshocks and sudden changes of groundwater level concerned the authorities. The residents were told to watch out. Because of all these different precursors, the authorities arranged the evacuation of the city. The army and rescue forces were mobilized and prepared emergency accommodation. Eventually, 1 million people were moved to a safe place. A short time later, an earthquake with a magnitude of 7.3 destroyed large parts of the city. It's estimated that the massive evacuation effort saved 150,000 lives. In the capital city of Taiwan, seismologists prefer to trust modern instruments. All seismic data is collected by the Central Weather Bureau.
Taiwan is situated on the border of the Eurasian Plate and the Philippine Ocean Plate. In addition, there is the Pacific earthquake belt around us. This is why earthquake shocks occur frequently here.
Tectonic plates move on average 2 centimeters per year. But in Taiwan, the heavy sea plate squeezes beneath the lighter continental plate by a whopping 8 centimeters every year. In the process, the plates may jam and the pressure rises. If suddenly the tension discharges, an earthquake will occur. Like on September the 21st, 1999. The epicenter was in the heart of the Taiwanese island. It was the biggest disaster in Taiwan since the Second World War and left 2,500 people dead. Despite these devastating figures, scientists in Taipei are proud of their level of earthquake warning.
We routinely analyze seismic information together with geophysical, GPS, ionospheric, geomagnetic, and groundwater data. Our early warning system can be considered mature. During the big earthquake in 1999, we were able to send out a warning message within 102 seconds.
An earthquake warning of about 2 minutes seems to be the maximum which is technically possible worldwide. But such a short warning works only if the people are prepared for disaster. In the Chinese city of Nanjing, school children learn how to react to an earthquake warning. They regularly practice an emergency evacuation. In order to keep loss of life to a minimum for the next quake, America relies mainly on earthquake-proof architecture and engineering. In addition, the United States Geological Survey spends $30 million each year to understand better the forces of nature.
My name is David Oppenheimer. I'm a seismologist and I work for the U.S. Geological Survey. There are 13 seismic networks in California and we all connect up using the internet. Most of our stations are in the urban areas today because we are trying to record ground motions very close to structures that might be damaged by earthquakes.
Next door, geologist David Lochner wants to study the mechanism of an earthquake with two pieces of rock.
Now we're going to make a laboratory version of an earthquake. And to do that, we need a fault surface. So here is the fault. And we'll put the sample together, and in the pressure vessel, we will squeeze it and force the fault to slide like this and cause an earthquake. So first we have to put this in the jacket and assemble the sample to put in the pressure vessel.
Will these small rock samples provide any useful information about the behavior of continent-sized tectonic plates?
I personally am not sure if we will ever predict earthquakes in a way that will be useful for society. And we know mostly where faults are, and we know the rate of activity on them from year to decade to century. So we can identify places that are at risk, but knowing the very short-term day-to-month type forecasting or prediction, that is a much more difficult problem today.
We have tried very hard. We have run specific experiments, but there's nothing that we see in the data that's reproducible that tells us that we can use that data to predict earthquakes, whether it's seismology or strain data or creeping faults, gas emissions, magnetometer data. None of it has been very reliable.
In October 1989, during the World Series of Baseball, geologists are rocked by surprise as they witness one of the heaviest quakes for decades. The region around San Francisco shook for almost 15 seconds. Because of the sports coverage, helicopters were in the air, able to record dramatic images.
25238, we have a major injury accident, Cypress and West.
Not everyone was surprised. One person expected the disaster. Jim Birkeland, a former county geologist, had developed his own method for predicting earthquakes.
In 1989, I was well aware of a number of factors that preceded earthquakes. We were having the highest tidal force in 3 years on the 14th of October. And at the same time, we had a record number of missing dogs and cats, as shown in the lost and found section of the local paper. Before the '89 quake, there were, instead of 4 or 5 missing cats, it went up to 28, which is the all-time record. And the dogs, missing dogs, went to one of the all-time records of 58. And so just 4 days before, there were at least 10 clues that a big quake was coming, and so I called the Gilroy Dispatch to predict it.
At least 3 or 4 trucks come on.
But no one acted on Jim Birkeland's warning. 63 people died under the falling debris. The prediction in a local newspaper also had drastic consequences for Birkeland.
I was suspended, and it wasn't just a few days, it was 2.5 months. You know, everything was really upset for having correctly predicted the World Series quake. And finally, in early January, I was told I could return to work if I would promise, cross my heart, I won't predict any more quakes on county time.
3 weeks before the quake, a different set of odd data was recorded near the epicenter. This time, there were no animals behaving strangely, but an instrument measuring the Earth's magnetic field. Anthony Fraser Smith, working at Stanford University, was puzzled about the data he was collecting.
We were at Corralitos making measurements of ultra-low frequency signals from space, and we're very used to how they looked. But all of a sudden, we began getting signals that were totally unusual and certainly bore no relationship whatsoever to the signals we had been measuring from space. These are some of the original data we recorded prior to the Loma Prieta earthquake that occurred in October 1989. Right here, about the 5th of October, we had this big increase. It's about 30 times the normal level that you see everywhere on every one of these charts. And the signals remained high up until this point. And then when the earthquake occurred, we lost electric power to our system, which is why there's this big drop-off. But just prior to the earthquake, in an interval of about 3 hours, there was another big increase up to a level which is about 100 times the level at all other times. I think a large number of scientists are somewhat convinced that there are magnetic fields preceding earthquakes. I actually do believe that they do exist, and if we make more measurements, it will help verify that that's the case.
I'm Joseph Kirschvink. I'm a professor of geobiology at the California Institute of Technology. I was intrigued by the fact that these honeybee swarming behaviors had been reported prior to major earthquakes in several parts of the globe, in different cultures, different backgrounds. But what is actually happening there? Each honeybee will drink a small amount of the honey, usually 60 microliters or so. And it basically loads its body up to the point where it can just barely fly with honey. By swarming, they would go and eat as much of the honey as they could, saving it for making the hive after the earthquake. So that's a very clear case where a behavior could minimize the harm done by an earthquake.
Kirschvink wants to prove that bees can notice changes in the magnetic field. This could explain why they seem to know beforehand that a quake will happen.
Many animals have a magnetic sensory system. So if there were electromagnetic changes before earthquakes, it's entirely possible that they may have learned through natural selection to escape or to do something that would help them escape from the effects of an earthquake. That's entirely plausible.
With a 50% sugar solution, he wants to attract the bees to the magnet.
Just a little drop in the middle.
As none of the bees would find the sugar solution on their own, Joseph Kirschvink gives some assistance.
She's now drinking the sugar water, and once she fills up, she's going to wander around and then fly in a small area pattern to memorize where it is, and then she'll run up and go back to the hive. Hopefully in 3 or 4 minutes she'll be back for more. It's very addictive, 50% sucrose.
Kirschvink is right. After a short time, the bee comes back.
And you will be a happy bee.
What happened when the bee flew to the probe with a magnetic field? The bee uses the Earth's magnetic field like a compass. In its abdomen, there are tiny minerals which are magnetic. These minerals always align parallel to the magnetic field lines. When the magnetic field changes, nerves are stimulated and the information is transferred to the brain.
Now we've got the magnet with the final strong sugar, and she's going to be coming back any time now. Once she fills up, we'll do the trick on her. We'll take off the strong sugar, put the magnet under one, and then there'll be water on the two targets. And so she'll go down, think the one with the magnet is the one, probably, she may be a little confused by having two targets. But what we've seen in past experiences, that when she finds the water, she'll get upset, she'll run around and land again and try the other target. But she'll make more attempts at the target with the magnet because she's been trained to associate the magnet with good sugar. And that tells us the animal can detect the magnetic field.
The experiment shows that bees can detect changes in the magnetic field and use this information to prepare for an earthquake. But for seismologists, the Earth's magnetic field plays only a minor role for the prediction of earthquakes.
My colleagues here at Caltech and the U.S. Geological Survey have about 300 seismic stations in Southern California alone. It wouldn't hurt to put a few magnetometers out there as well.
There is, however, one geophysicist who uses magnetometers. He measures ultra-low frequency waves from space to determine changes in the Earth's magnetic field.
I'm Simon Klemperer. I'm professor of geophysics at Stanford University. We're trying to find out the relationship between earthquake activity and ULF waves. ULF waves are pervasive in the atmosphere all the time. They're created by the solar wind impinging on the atmosphere, and then they radiate through the atmosphere and propagate into the Earth. This is our vertical magnetometer. It's about 1 meter long, set vertically down in the Earth. It consists of a magnetic core and then thousands of turns of electrical wire around it. When the ULF waves impinge on the Earth and change the magnetic field by a part in 100,000, it generates a tiny voltage on those wires that we record on our digitizers and signal analyzers down there. If we see any anomalous signals, we'll look carefully at the amplitudes and the timing of these signals and try and develop geological theories about what might have happened in the moments before the earthquake ruptured and use that to understand the physics of the earthquake process. Eventually, if we build up that understanding of the physics, then we may have a tool that could lead to the predictability of earthquakes. We have this network of 5 stations in the Bay Area, but we only have about a 2/3 or 3/4 chance of a very big earthquake in the next 30 years. That means during my professional career, we will probably record an earthquake, a big earthquake, just once on my network.
Historically, violent and destructive earthquakes have been witnessed by almost every generation in Japan. A religious pilgrimage site has been dedicated to an animal which has a special role in the occurrence of these earthquakes.
My name is Osamu Kanayama, and I am the priest of the Omura Shrine. The catfish is very important for us. It is holy to us, like a god.
The Japanese pray to be spared from a deadly earthquake. An old legend tells the story of the catfish and its power to cause earthquakes. Once a giant catfish laid on the ocean floor, with the Japanese island resting on its back. The god Kashima restrained the giant fish with a stone. But when Kashima was distracted, the catfish moved and the earth of Japan trembled. Catfish are well known for their sensitive reactions before earthquakes. Once this fish was part of a scientific research project until its owner died. For the widow, Yoshiko Ikeya, the fish is something very special.
On February 23, 2011, the catfish started to behave strangely. It had stopped eating and seemed almost dead. I thought it was dying because it floated vertically in the water and its head was just under the water's surface. This was very unusual.
Her husband, Motoye Ikea, had investigated why catfish react in such an intense manner before an earthquake.
This is a picture of my husband and the setup of his experiment. A television crew took it. He looks so happy because the catfish reacted very well. His colleagues were skeptical and said, if you succeed, you can just save perhaps 10 of the thousands of people. My husband answered, the number of people isn't important. Saving 10 people means my research is worth it. That's what he always said.
Chihiro Yamanaka has recreated the experiment in his laboratory. Once he was a student of Motoye Ikea.
So now I put an electric field between the electrodes and a catfish inside of the aquarium. The voltage between the electrodes will be 0.5 volts. Under usual conditions, a battery has 1.5 volts. The voltage is quite low, and the duration of the pulse is about 100 milliseconds, a very short time. And I put the electric pulse now, like this, and the catfish can feel the electric change right now. I put my finger inside and try it again. Yes, the catfish can feel the electric field, but I never feel anything.
Special sensor cells all over the body enable the catfish to register the electric field in the water. The catfish uses this unique sense mainly to locate prey. The respiratory muscles from other fish generate tiny electrical impulses. These signals are picked up by the various sensors all over the catfish's body. The small time difference enables the catfish to locate the prey precisely. For the Japanese, dogs also play an important role in their everyday life. About 13 million live on the island state. Some of these pets, like the Kinkori family's dog, have special skills.
Yeah,
6 years ago, we got our dog and immediately noticed that she is something special. She always shows the same behavior before an earthquake.
She lies on her back and pedals with her legs.
Sometimes it happens at the day of the earthquake or before.
5 or 6 days, sometimes even a week in advance.
But it happens regularly before heavy earthquakes. My name is Mitsuaki Ota, and I'm a professor of veterinary medicine. 12 years ago, I started to research the relationship between human beings and animals at Azabu University.
The Kinkori family's dog is very ill and no longer reacts before earthquakes.
I have worked with dogs and cats for a very long time to verify whether they react to electromagnetic waves. Recently, we've developed an instrument which generates electromagnetic fields so we can now conduct specific experiments. Beneath the floor is a metal ring which generates electromagnetic fields. Here, they are the strongest. It's about 30 volts per meter. But the head of dogs is usually on a higher level. Here, we measure about 20 volts per meter.
Now the experiment can start. Ota asks his assistants to take one dog after another and lead them through the electromagnetic field. He randomly switches the field on and off to ensure that no other stimulus affects the dog and distorts the result. Will at least one dog react to the electromagnetic field? The search for an earthquake-sensitive dog is unsuccessful today. When finally the office cat passes through the setup without any reaction, Ota stops his search for the day. He's not surprised about today's results.
In our experience, only 12 out of 500 dogs react to electromagnetic waves.
So only exceptional dogs are able to sense changes in the electromagnetic field. But Mitsuaki Ota does not give up his search. He has grand plans for man's best friend. South of San Francisco is the workshop of a pioneer in earthquake research.
My name is Friedemann Freund. My work is considered controversial by some because it's so new. We have a piece of rock here that comes from deep in the Earth's crust, and we have attached a copper electrode to this far end. And in this area here, we have another copper electrode hidden under this piston, and we apply pressure on this portion of the rock. Then, when we connect this electrode to this electrode through an ampere meter, a current starts to flow through the rock, which we can measure. And this was never known and recognized before.
The press simulates the forces of tectonic plates before an earthquake. The experiment assumes that also in nature, electric streams flow through the Earth's crust before an earthquake.
The presence of an electric current has enormous consequences for understanding a large number of processes, including what animals might feel when the Earth becomes stressed prior to an earthquake.
Is it the actual electric current that the animals sense? Or are they provoked by electrically charged atoms, so-called ions, that are released to the air by the underground current? Scientists now want to use lab rats to investigate how animals react to ions in the air. The experiment is still in the planning phase.
My name is Professor Dan Hawley in the Department of Biological Sciences at San Jose State University. We've designed a laboratory experiment which will help us answer that question. What is the mechanism? You know, what are the sensors? How are they sensing the change in the ionization? Is it something olfactory? Is it something gustatory relative to taste? Is it irritation of the nasal passages? Whatever the sensor is, does it change animal hormonal levels, for instance? Does it produce a stress response or an alarm reaction? And maybe it's the alarm reaction that's producing the change in producing the bizarre behavior. So Friedemann, we've designed an experiment to help understand your theory about the compression of the rocks deep in the crust. It's a habitat choice selection experiment. We have a habitat A, habitat B connected by a tube. And what we will do is we will take this ion generator, and this will produce either positive ions or negative ions, so we can study the effects of each. And this will actually go on to one of the habitats at a time. At the end of 14 days, we'll move this to the other side, so it's a crossover design, which then controls for the effect of the habitat itself.
Yes.
Large amounts of positive ions could affect the body and trigger a specific behavior of the rats. In several experiments, the researcher wants to investigate whether a higher ion concentration in one chamber will cause confusion, headache, nervousness, and elevated pain sensitivity. The rat should then have enough reason to switch the chamber.
This experiment is really extremely well designed. It follows all the strict procedures that you have to apply when you do a controlled experiment. And by offering animals the choice between two identical habitats and change the conditions under which, I think is exactly what we need in order to make progress in this area of animal behavior. Because we cannot ask them, they cannot tell us. They will tell us through their behavior what they feel.
On April the 6th, 2009, L'Aquila in central Italy was hit by a devastating earthquake. 308 people died. Even today, parts of the historic center are closed for safety reasons. Lago di San Rufino is located 75 kilometers north of L'Aquila. Every year between March and June, common toads populate the lake. It's mating season.
I'm Rachel Grant. I'm a scientist studying amphibians at the Open University.
For years, the English biologist has been visiting the lake to observe the mating habits of the toads, so she was able to collect plenty of data about their behavior.
We've studied these toads since 2006, and their behavior is quite predictable.
At night, the animals are most active. But 1 week before the earthquake, everything was different.
In 2009, there was a dramatic change in their behavior. When the full moon was approaching, the number of toads seen declined from 96 one night to 2 the following evening. And for 5 days, there were no toads.
A mystery. Did the disappearance of the toads have something to do with the earthquake? A first clue comes from an independent researcher and inventor.
My name is Giampaolo Giuliani. The last 20 years, I have worked for the Laboratory of Nuclear Physics in Gran Sasso. The Earth was shaking for 28 seconds. 28 seconds, which seemed to be endless. I developed an instrument, the gamma tester. This device can detect radon gas. Radon is a radioactive gas which rises naturally from the ground. According to my research, we can say that there is a heavy increase of radon gas only before an earthquake, never during and never after an earthquake.
Giuliani had set up 4 instruments. 48 hours before the earthquake, the values of the radon concentration suddenly tripled. This was a clear warning signal for Giuliani.
Between April 4th and 5th, we registered a steep increase of radon. The data we collected at the time, we had never seen before.
We listed a lot of possible causes that may have made the toads leave. For example, we looked at gases which are escaping from the ground, such as radon. We ruled out most of these on the basis of the time period, because the toads left 5 days before, so we knew that radon gas was affected after that period, so we didn't think they were the causes of it. So we finally came up with a possible cause, which we think is the release of charged particles causing oxidation in water chemistry.
Toads are very sensitive to chemical changes in the water. For amphibians, oxidation in the water could even become life-threatening. Special receptors on the skin sense the changes in the water and send out warning signals to the brain. The toad flees. Whether charged particles from the ground actually cause an oxidation in the water has only been a theory until now. Friedemann Freund integrates Rachel's assumptions in his experiments.
We set up an experiment in which we specifically were looking for the formation of hydrogen peroxide while we were stressing a rock at this end, and here we had a pool of water, and we were measuring And of course, we were closing the circuit so that the current was flowing. And we were able to show that when the charge carriers travel through the rock, enter the water becomes stoichiometrically oxidized to hydrogen peroxide.
Friedemann Freund's experiment gives a plausible explanation for the disappearance of the toads. Shortly after the earthquake, the amphibians started returning to the lake. 3 days later, half of the toads were back in the water. For Rachel Grant, it's a clear sign that the exodus of toads and the earthquake are related. In the future, the biologist will take water samples regularly. She needs to wait for the next quake, but then she will be able to determine whether her theory is right. Once it's verified to what precisely the toads had reacted, earthquake researchers can develop the corresponding detectors. Some Taiwanese earthquake scientists have been looking not at the ground, but into space. The Ionospheric Radioscience Laboratory of the National Central University leads the world in observing the effect of charged particles.
In 1990, we experienced many quakes, and before they occurred, we always recorded a high density of electrons in the ionosphere. I was interested in their relationship and started to study it. In our research project, Formosat 3, we work with 6 monitoring satellites. They can record the ionosphere 3-dimensionally and analyze it.
When in 1999 Taiwan was hit by the big earthquake, space researchers were already recording unique data of the ionosphere. Although they were not able to give a concrete warning to the public, they discovered a link between their data and the earthquake. A few days beforehand, the satellites had registered a significant decrease in the number of electrons in the ionosphere.
In the afternoons, 4, 3, and 1 day before the earthquake, the density of electrons suddenly fell by about 50% below the usual figures. After the earthquake, the instruments returned back to the normal values.
Because of the enormous pressure in the ground, positively charged particles emerge in the rock and travel to the Earth's surface. The positive charge of the Earth's surface is transferred to the air in the form of positive ions. This layer of ions rises 300 kilometers to the ionosphere, where it changes the ion density.
Because of the satellites and the accidental earth shocks, we were able to prove physically the precursors of the earthquakes in the ionosphere.
Instead of satellite technology, Mitsuaki Ota in Yokohama still pins his hopes on Japan's most popular pet. He has developed a system to train the dogs so that they can warn their owners in case they sense the coming of an earthquake.
When dogs feel the electromagnetic field, they often bark or scratch on the floor, but people cannot interpret this behavior correctly because it is nothing unusual. We have developed this system where the animal can provide a clear sign to the human owner. When the dog feels the changes in the electromagnetic field, it pulls a rope and gets a reward. A lamp indicates to the owner that the system was activated. We have trained the dogs for that.
Dogs as an early warning system? This vision from Japan appears adventurous, but several animals actually could predict a fatal quake and save human lives. Earthquake prediction with the help of animals seems to be only a question of time.
I am convinced that animals are much more sensitive to natural processes because they live closer to nature.
If there's even a tiny chance that what we know about animals can save someone's life, then I think this deserves to be funded.
We shouldn't have to rely on animal behavior to tell us when an earthquake is coming. If the animals are perceiving something, we should be able to measure it in the laboratory or in field sensors at a level better than they could do. We're better than Mother Nature for some things.
Earthquake forecasting would certainly be possible, and I would dare to say that if we get a little bit of funding, a little bit means a few $1 million per year, it could be done in 5 years.
Every year, without warning, natural disasters shatter our world. Thousands suffer as lives and property are lost. And we ask ourselves, how could this have been avoided? Is there something we're missing?
The animal factor.
My cats are acting very strangely.
There are signals from the Earth before the earthquake.
Biological processes, animals, seem to be sensitive to certain frequencies of electromagnetic radiation.
Maybe there is something deeper that we can learn from them as human beings.
If we studied the way the animals react and how they react, we'd be in a better position to predict avalanches, as well as earthquakes and tsunamis. But if we don't start with this research, then of course we'll never achieve an effective warning system.
We've all heard about animals in this sixth sense. But is it more than just instinct that gives them a sense of danger? Khao Lak Beach, Thailand. A holiday video shot by tourists on a typically beautiful day. Everything is peaceful, apart, that is, from the loud and disturbing noises made by a local inhabitant. The date was December 25th, 2004, one day before the killer wave struck. The morning of December 26th. People here have no idea that one of the most deadly tsunamis in history is about to strike with devastating force. Oblivious to the danger, they carry on with life as usual. But the animal kingdom is apprehensive and on high alert. Right behind Khao Lak Lakeside Road is the number 8 Elephants Camp. The usually affable, easygoing animals wait here to carry tourists on a round trip of the area. On this fateful morning, Elephant Mahout Kritsada Salangam had been leading a group of Japanese visitors. It started off as a regular tour. No one was ready for what happened next.
We were going along the flat coastal road facing the ocean, but the elephant simply refused to carry on in that direction. It wanted to get off that road. That was the elephant's strong feeling.
Meanwhile, back at the camp, 2 more elephants were waiting for their first tour.
The other 2 elephants were tethered to the pole nearby. The elephant which the tourists were riding had been gone for about 3 minutes. Then suddenly these 2 elephants which were shackled kicked and broke their chains and ran away up the hill.
I didn't know what was wrong at the time, so I just kept on going. We reached a tree and a bend in the road. At that point, the sea was behind us, and the elephant was very nervous, swaying its head from side to side, looking left and right. When the elephant came up here, it just ran amok.
The Khao Lak shoreline was completely destroyed by the tidal wave. More than 700 people were killed here alone. But thanks to the elephants, the tourists who happened to be riding on their backs were safe on high ground, up a hill some 1,000 meters away from the beach and the mayhem. To this day, no one fully understands what the elephants were reacting to. But what we do know is that elephants have a keen sense of hearing, and that the soles of their feet are highly sensitive, capable of detecting faraway vibrations.
Elephants can feel vibrations. They can also hear sounds coming from those vibrations. I think it could feel the sensations from the approaching tidal wave.
The tsunami claimed almost 300,000 human lives. Yet in all the parts of Thailand, Sri Lanka, and other areas destroyed by the tsunami, not a single animal that was free to move lost its life. Was it the approaching tidal wave they sensed? Or did they feel the sea quake 2 hours before, with its epicenter hundreds of kilometers away in Indonesia? How did they do it? Is it simply instinct, or are there physical or even chemical stimuli they respond to? Phuket Island, South Thailand. The tsunami hit the island's western coast at 10 a.m. An earthquake had cracked open the seabed of Indonesia's Sumatra island 2 hours before. But as early as 7 a.m., something out of the ordinary was happening on the roof of Phuket's Orchid Hotel.
It's some noisy from the dog from the rooftop. We put the dog there, they run around, I heard that. And then I sit here, have an earthquake on the 8 o'clock something.
October 2005. Tens of thousands of people die in Pakistan in yet another violent earthquake. There's massive destruction in the capital Islamabad and outlying areas. Later, there came reports that just before the quake, birds there had been crying loudly. Dogs had been seen running through the city, barking frantically. Wild pigs, which usually roam the city at night, at this time of the year, had totally disappeared the night before. For centuries, there have been reports that animals behave in conspicuously strange ways before a quake. Days, sometimes even weeks before the event, the animals seem disturbed. On the 6th of May 1976, an earthquake destroyed villages in the northern Italian province of Friaul. One of them was the birthplace of Helmut Tribuch, who grew up there as a member of the German-speaking minority. When he heard of the destruction of his home village, he hurried back to help. Residents described to him how animals had been behaving strangely just before the quake. They wondered if he could explain this to them, since he was a physicist.
I was then confronted with and held the opinion that it was a psychological rather than a physiological phenomenon. That it was only in retrospect that people believed something had been happening with the animals. I set out to find what was behind it by interviewing as many residents as possible and collating many reports. I wanted to know whether it was just a psychological phenomenon or whether it had scientific relevance.
Tribuch shares his interests with geophysicist Kellen Wang. Born in China, Wang now lives in Canada and is the first Western-trained scientist to be given access to the official records of the most astonishing earthquake in history. Although skeptical at first, the evidence he found there has prompted a reversal in his opinion.
Well, the earthquake occurred in a place like this. That's in the Liaoning province and near the town of Haicheng.
The 1975 Haicheng earthquake is the only quake ever successfully predicted. In China, from ancient times, it was common knowledge that animals behaved in unusual ways before a quake. The population was taught how to watch for telltale signs in animal behavior.
It was clever. These fans were handed out to the people. On the fans are pictures which show what one should look out for. For example, if horses suddenly shy away for no apparent reason, if fish jump out of the water, if chickens fly onto trees, or if snakes unexpectedly come out of the ground.
So we managed to find a logbook of a earthquake observatory, and they had recorded many things a bit over a month before the earthquake. A few children and found a snake. It was 1.25 meters long. You can read this. It was cold winter. It was in January. In northeast China, it was very cold. And it was so cold that actually during the earthquake, more than 300 people died of hypothermia, frozen to death because the shelters could not resist the coldness. And in that coldness, hibernating snakes came out of their hibernation dens, and also frogs and other things.
The city's inhabitants were evacuated in time. 200,000 lives were saved. Observing animal behavior had been an important part of a scientific approach to predicting earthquakes.
The Chinese authorities had regularly published pictures that were taken before earthquakes. Some of them were dramatic. For example, before the earthquake on the 16th of August 1976 in Songfang and Bingwu in the Sichuan province, rats were seen escaping to the top of telephone masts. They wanted to get away from the earth, escape as high up as they could. These were dramatic events. Or, for example, when rabbits fled onto the roofs of huts. Or something else which was regularly observed, dogs becoming extremely aggressive. No one understood why.
Tangshan in the summer of 1976. A massive earthquake has destroyed the city in northern China. This time, the authorities did not evacuate the inhabitants in time. The magnitude 7.8 quake was the most deadly of the 20th century. It claimed 250,000 human lives. Because it struck in the middle of the night, most of its victims were asleep. Many who laid injured in the rubble died before they could be rescued. Unlike Haicheng, there weren't any foreshocks in Tangshan, but many sources did report unusual animal behavior. Over and above this, seismologists registered uncommonly strong electromagnetic waves before the quake.
I certainly believe there are signals from the earth before the earthquake. And the animals do not have the sixth sense. They certainly sense geophysical signals.
Looking at all the earthquakes and the early signs that preceded them, I noticed three main phenomena. One is unusual animal behavior. The other is the appearance of light glowing in the atmosphere. And the third is the development of fog. What all three phenomena have in common is that they all probably originate from some changes in the atmosphere. Based on the observation of these extraordinary occurrences, I concluded that my hypothesis is plausible, that some electrically charged carriers emanate from the Earth.
To the south of Phuket Island is Tai Mai Village. People have settled here only in recent years. For centuries before, they lived as sea gypsies, moving from island to island in search of a catch. Although they're now land-based, they still have an intimate knowledge of the sea. Much of what they know about the sea and its many creatures has been handed down to them by their forefathers. On the night before the Sumatran sea quake, people heard unusual noises in the village.
It was quite unusual that our roosters did not crow at the usual time. It was strange for them to crow at 2 a.m. instead of dawn. Our ancestors say that if a rooster crows at the wrong time, it's not good. It's not natural. It's abnormal, and so it's a bad omen. This is the belief we've been handed down. It is what our grandfathers and grandmothers say.
Like their ancestors before them, they still make their living from the sea. As Tai Mai village lies protected in a bay, the force of the tsunami was somewhat mitigated. Still, the village was not totally spared, and the people did feel its impact. Looking back, the villagers can now see how there'd been clues announcing the impending disaster.
Before the tsunami came, the number of fish seemed very unnatural. There were a lot more fish than usual. Then after the tsunami, the number of fish dropped. Now there are only about half of what there used to be.
Other fishermen in the area also reported that before the tsunami, unusually huge amounts of fish were caught. Throughout history, people have observed that much bigger quantities of fish are trapped close to the shore just before a quake. Something happening deep down in the ocean, some kind of unusual force, seems to disturb the fish and propel them upwards. San Francisco, long considered one of America's most attractive cities. But its seemingly idyllic location between the Pacific Ocean and the Sierra Nevada mountains could also be its downfall, literally. San Francisco sits right on the active San Andreas Fault, making it one of the most earthquake-prone cities in the world. In 1906, San Francisco was almost completely destroyed by a violent quake lasting 40 seconds. The magnitude 7.8 quake killed at least 700 people. No surprise then that the number of people reporting strange behavior in animals is increasing. And more often than not, it's cats which captured their attention.
Shortly before, say 3 or 4 hours before we had a really major earthquake, he started to run around. He got very agitated, talking at us. My young son was living with me at the time, and talking. I mean, meowing, letting, there's something that's going to happen. And we couldn't understand, and I remember my son saying, I think we're going to have an earthquake. And we really did.
Renegade scientist James Birkeland has been privately predicting earthquakes for 30 years now. Mainstream scientists dismiss the idea that such predictions are possible. But Birkeland says all living beings can feel signals beforehand.
We are electrical. Basically, we are electrical. And when I see a flock of birds flying together and then suddenly changing direction without bumping into each other, like individual cells of a single body. How is that done? It's electrical.
Birkeland was once part of the scientific establishment, working for the state of California as a county geologist. However, after successfully predicting earthquakes, he was banished, and his research now places him well outside accepted practice. In 1989, an intense earthquake shook California. A few days earlier, radio technicians on board a U.S. military submarine had recorded strong electromagnetic impulses, which could not be explained. They got these signals close to the coast, not far from Loma Prieta, the epicenter of the quake. People living in the area reported that many animals seemed highly agitated before the disaster. James Birkeland had already developed his own special system to predict earthquakes.
With the Loma Prieta quake, I had been monitoring daily for 10 years lost and found animals in the Mercury News in San Jose. The animals normally were 3 or 4 missing cats. It suddenly went to 27. And the dogs, instead of being 15 or so, went to 58 or 57 at first. And then they dropped down a little bit, and then they peaked up again. The dogs went to 58, and the cats went back up to 16. But the 27 was an entirely different universe.
Official scientific researchers generally disregard the study of non-geological pre-earthquake phenomena.
People remember events like an earthquake, and they say, oh, we had an earthquake. Oh, I remember my dog did something different. And they forget that, well, 6 months ago, the dog did something else, but nothing happened, so it's not remembered. So there's lots of issues like that.
The animal factor. Now, I kind of discarded that. All my education said, oh, these multi-million-dollar black boxes know a lot more than Mother Nature.
We have to say that it's possible that there were electromagnetic fields. In fact, I've written a paper on the subject of how this could be produced. But it now looks like that result is really not going to stand the real scientific test. It hasn't been reproduced. We've been much closer to many other earthquakes, bigger earthquakes, for which there have been no such signals.
In the US, scientific research into earthquakes takes quite a different approach. Parkfield is a particularly active part of the San Andreas Fault. A magnitude 6 earthquake is expected here sometime in the next few years. Scientists are drilling deep into the center of the fault line and plan on placing instruments inside it for the first time. They hope this will help them better understand the mechanics of earthquakes and the physical and chemical processes of seismic activity. What they will not measure is the potential emergence of electromagnetic signals.
The difficulty is that to protect the hole, you have to put casing in the drill hole. And the casing, of course, is made of steel. And it makes it very difficult to measure magnetic fields within a steel casing. We discussed the possibility of actually measuring electric fields, but again, we have to be outside the casing, and the casing is acting as a huge short that's shorting everything out. So at this point, it's not very clear that those sorts of measurements are going to be made in this particular borehole.
When animals in Thailand reacted to the approaching tsunami, it was not just confined to those living on land. People also noticed dolphins behaving differently. The fishing village of Thap Noi on Thailand's west coast was completely wiped out by the tsunami. In the earlier part of the morning, before the tsunami hit, one of the fishermen was at sea. He was in a boat with his brother when suddenly a group of 5 dolphins appeared beside the boat.
Dolphins swimming along with the boat is something we don't normally see around here. The way they were jumping right out of the water, thrashing the water with their tails and making unusually loud noises. That's something we've never seen in these waters. Usually, you only see this behavior when dolphins are trained for shows. They were swimming along the right side of the boat for about 5 minutes. I didn't think anything of it until my brother said, "You know, when they behave like this, there must be something wrong."
Shortly afterwards, the tsunami struck. The boat capsized and the men were washed onto the shores of an island. They were lucky they survived. The city of Kobe in Japan. In 1995, the earth under this city shook intensely for 20 seconds. High-rise buildings collapsed, highways caved in, and more than 5,000 people died. At Kobe Harbor, a broken wall at the quay remains a solemn memorial to those who perished in the disaster. In neighboring Osaka, there is a science festival for children. In Japan, because of the frequency of earthquakes, even young children are familiar with the phenomenon. In recent years, just before a quake, there have been an increasing number of reports of interrupted television transmissions or of mobile phones ringing without anyone calling them. Before retiring, Motoji Ikeya was a physics professor at Osaka University. Now he's trying to get children excited about the adventure of science. He demonstrates to these children how electromagnetic rays can trigger a battery-powered toy into action without their having to flick a switch. As far as Professor Ikeya is concerned, many precursory phenomena have a single cause: strong, irregular electrical impulses.
Animal behavior before earthquakes can be linked to electrical phenomena. It's possible that very strong electricity appears on the ground surface some 2 hours or even a week prior to the earthquake.
A few hours before the disaster in Kobe, a dolphin was seen jumping out of its basin at the local zoo. Motoji Ikeya believes that it was electrical signals that caused the animal to react. He's now headed to a dolphin research center at Muruto, on the island of Shikoku, where he's planning to conduct an experiment to confirm his theory that dolphins react to electromagnetic impulses transmitted through the water.
Electromagnetic waves are generated when a rock is crushed underground at great pressure. But we do not know exactly why this electromagnetic wave is generated, how it is created, or the mechanics of it.
Back in the United States, it is precisely this same mystery of electromagnetic signals that has another scientist intrigued.
Yeah, this Friedemann Freund.
German physicist Friedemann Freund works at NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center. Freund is doing his research both at NASA and at the University of San Jose in California. A discovery he made decades earlier still preoccupies him. Freund found that when the crystalline structure of certain rocks is destroyed, electrical current is generated.
Yeah.
He's prepared an experiment to prove his hypothesis.
So this piston is pressing down, and you see here there's double electrical insulation between the piston and the rock. And when we press this in this volume between the piston, charges will be activated. And then they flow out, the positive holes, the holes flow out in this direction, and the electrons flow out in the back direction.
The test object is a piece of gabbro rock. The choice of rock is significant because it forms most of the Earth's crust at the depth of 10 to 20 kilometers.
Okay, now we are ready to go.
Bit by bit, 10 tons of pressure is loaded on.
But initially there was a very big spike. So there are these two currents flowing already now out of the rock. But when we now increase the speed, you will see that in these 2 meters at the bottom, these numbers, the positive number in the middle and the negative number at the bottom, both will go up as more and more current is going to flow out of the rocks.
The tension in the lab is palpable. Freund and his assistants have their eyes glued to the meters. Then suddenly, the numbers on the meters jump. Electrical current has been released. The experiment is a success.
Rocks are normally insulators. Now, when we squeeze a rock, we suddenly activate in this otherwise insulating rock a bunch of electronic charge carriers, and they spread out into the rock and to the surface. And at the surface, these electronic charge carriers generate enormous electric fields of the order of 1 million volts per centimeter. And these local electric fields produce strange phenomena in the air, like they ionize the air. They can even cause corona discharges along the edges of the rock, and it is possible that animals are sensitive to some of these phenomena that we start to observe in the laboratory.
Khao Lak Harbour, Thailand. Before the tsunami, Khao Lak was a popular tourist destination. Boats here would take visitors out to sea on diving expeditions. One of the boats was the Bubble Blue. On the morning of the 26th of December 2004, something extraordinary happened within meters of the boat. More than 50 dolphins appeared unusually close. One of the tourists who had a video camera with him captured what was to him a remarkable sight. Also on board was dive instructor Christopher Cruz.
In that event, I believe they were communicating with us, and they were playing and jumping in front of the boat as if they were trying to tell us, like, what are you doing here? It's dangerous, follow us, we'll bring you to safety. We were close to the island. The dolphins were taking us away into deeper water where we would be a lot safer.
It is the first time I have ever seen dolphins do that. Normally, they just swim around like usual.
In the face of it all, I believe that the dolphins were there because they were communicating with human beings to save us. So for me, it's a very, very profound experience just to be there and to witness something like that.
In Moroto, Japan, veterinary students regularly visit this Asabu University Dolphin Research Center. The focus of the research conducted here is the communication between dolphins and humans. Over time, the dolphins have become familiar with the students. The animals respond to the smallest signs by, for example, opening their blowholes. Veterinary Professor Mitsuaki Ota heads the dolphin station and will be helping Dr. Ikea with his experiment.
Animals can prove very useful in their relationships with human beings. One advantage is the animal's capacity to predict an earthquake when human beings are still unaware of it. I have been researching this seriously.
In this experiment, the researchers' primary aim is to scientifically prove that dolphins do react to increased electrical activity in the water. The researchers simulate signals which occur in the water before an earthquake. Ota connects cables to two metal grills. Ikea intends passing tiny electrical impulses through the grills.
There should not be any problem with the intensity Dr. Ikea is using. If there should be any effect that makes them uncomfortable, they will swim away immediately. So I believe there is no danger at all. They are not confined, and this area is big enough for them to swim away.
The two grills are immersed in the water. They're placed at the edge of the smaller inner basin, at a distance of 4 meters apart. The electrical current that flows between them is minimal. Are the animals going to react to the electricity? If they do, it would be the first time that it's been proven that dolphins can sense the smallest of electrical impulses in water.
どうぞ。ちょっとノブやんね、今ちょっとだけ流すので、この辺から取ってくれる？これを感じること。
When the electrical impulses are introduced into the water, the dolphins avoid the smaller basin. They swim along together side by side for an unusually long time.
They have gone so far away. One of them is hiding under something. So I think the dolphin must be sensing something.
He's telling us something, but
nobody knows.
Even a professor of dolphin cannot understand what he speaks.
The next phase of the experiment is about to begin. The students prepare to feed the dolphins in the inner basin. Ikea is then going to introduce slightly stronger electrical impulses into the water. Ota is on standby to monitor any change in the dolphin's behavior. The student who has his hands and feet in the water can't feel any of the tiny electrical signals. But what about the dolphins? They are not coming into the basin, even though they're being offered food there.
If they're responding to it, it means they are very sensitive, maybe even more sensitive to electricity than sharks.
And then the strangest thing happens. The dolphins are making intense noises, louder than the students have ever heard before. To Professor Ota, the experiment has produced some unequivocal results.
There are one or two effects I can think of. Usually dolphins go into the basin without hesitation, but when the current was induced, they did not go in. This is one of the effects. The other effect was that dolphins usually communicate by making sounds through their breathing holes. Now they were making a lot of intensive sounds, much more than usual. So I believe these are the two obviously different and unusual behaviors.
For many years, a British scientist has been examining natural phenomena that can't be explained by accepted scientific knowledge. Rupert Sheldrake's study focuses on the relationship between humans and animals. He also includes in his research the capacity of animals to sense earthquakes before they happen.
Well, I think of the physical theories of earthquakes, the most plausible is the electrical theory. The idea that there are electrical changes in the Earth's field before an earthquake occurs, and that animals can somehow respond to this. Of all the different physical theories, this is the most plausible, but I doubt if it in fact explains the whole phenomenon. I think there's more to it.
The Pasnau Valley in Austria. A large avalanche which claimed 30 lives occurred here on 23rd February 1999. Then came reports about the eve of the avalanche, that the chamois came down in droves from the mountains and into the valleys. When alarmed, chamois usually climb higher, so this was unusual behavior for them.
I collected these reports, and then I had a research assistant in Switzerland who went round interviewing avalanche experts, local avalanche people in Austria, Switzerland and France. And I had many stories that suggested animals can indeed anticipate avalanches. There's the evidence from animal behavior before earthquakes, avalanches, tsunamis, and man-made disasters, and accidents, animals giving warnings of accidents, that may have an explanation in terms of physical causes. But I think the fact that these whole areas have been so taboo within science is because most scientists suspect they can't be explained in terms of physical causes. If it was just a matter of sensing vibrations before earthquakes, why would this be controversial? I mean, we all agree about vibrations, seismologists can measure them. I think that these are also part of a body of evidence that suggests there can be influences from the future.
People who spend a lot of time with animals often talk about an inexplicable connection between them and humans. Animals can appear to have telepathic skills and are sometimes even able to sense the future. From a scientific standpoint, of course, such claims are viewed with robust skepticism.
I find many of my colleagues respond by saying, if we don't understand it, if we haven't got a theory, we can't talk about it. That's very unscientific, because at one time no one understood gravitation, at one time no one understood electricity. If we never proceeded into areas we don't understand, we'd never find out anything new.
Los Angeles lies only a few miles west of the San Andreas Fault. The threat from quakes is just as real here as it is in San Francisco. Many people here live in dread of the big one. While they wait, they have to live through the small and medium quakes that occur regularly. Maureen Hall has spent her life training animals for action in Hollywood movies and the circus. To train animals to this degree requires detailed knowledge of behavior modification and a thorough understanding of animal psychology and physiology.
Do you want a nut?
Working with them day in and day out, there's little she doesn't know about animals.
In December, just the day before that tsunami hit, he was very cranky. Him and a companion parrot were both just unusually cranky. It's like, you know, stay away from me. We've got things to handle. We've got to take care of this. Just stay out. Yeah, pretty out here today, huh? Yeah, it's a good day out here. Now, I don't believe I could have done this on the top of his head the day previous to the tsunami, because he was just a little bit upset and a little bit nervous about it, and it was like, you know, just leave me alone.
Marsha Adams is a biologist. Before she began studying pre-earthquake animal behavior, she worked in a number of hospitals. There, she observed unusual changes in some of the patient's biological processes in the hours or days leading up to earthquakes. For instance, there would be unusually high or low rates of bleeding during surgery or out-of-the-ordinary allergic reactions to drugs. She began monitoring this and made the link to electromagnetic waves.
There are many hypotheses, many theories about how electromagnetic signals or long radio waves
influence biological processes. It probably happens at the cellular level, at the cell membrane level, but nobody knows for sure. There are scientific organizations that are dedicated to studying the effects of electricity on people. But my guess is that that the long radio waves cause hormonal changes, things like adrenaline. Everybody knows about adrenaline, the fight or flight response, and that this influences mood and behavior in the animals.
You know, I can't tell you that I can absolutely guarantee that this horse knew before that tsunami hit. I don't know what else would set him off. He is extremely calm, and that is probably the only time that I have ever seen him was just before that tsunami hit. It's the only time that I have ever, if a real cute mare went down the street, he would be running around all excited. But generally, with nothing going on, he would be just like this, but not that day. He was kind of running around and just extra alert, ears up, head up, you know, like what's going on. After I looked it up and thought about it, it was probably just about 24 hours before that hit. After 2 or 3 days, when I started putting it together with him and the parrots, then I started realizing there's something else going on here, and of course by then we all knew about the tsunami.
Biological processes, animals, seem to be sensitive to certain frequencies of electromagnetic radiation, and these frequencies are capable of traveling around the world with very little what we call attenuation or decrease. So it's theoretically possible that some of these signals from a very, very large earthquake could reach the other side of the Earth and perhaps influence all the animals on Earth simultaneously, not just the ones in Los Angeles.
The gibbons in Thailand's Khao Lak National Park are familiar with human beings and like to come close to them.
We noticed something interesting 4 or 5 days before the tsunami. In this area, there are many squirrels and gibbons. They're used to humans, and the gibbons would often come all the way down to the main office. But during these 4 or 5 days, right before the tsunami happened, the gibbons stopped coming. They just disappeared. I admit that I didn't pay much attention at the time. I didn't really notice. For the next couple of weeks, I was very busy with lots of cleanup work to do. But my staff reported to me that for about 15 days after the tsunami, the gibbons stayed away. But then they started to come back. So they're back now. But they're more careful. They won't come down to the ground anymore. They just stay safely up in the trees.
Khao Lak Beach still bears the scars left behind by the killer waves. But as the landscape slowly recovers, so do the people. With aid from around the world, the work of rebuilding is well underway, with houses and hotels being constructed, not only to provide shelter, but to revive the economic lifeline of tourism. People here say that beyond the havoc it wreaked, the tsunami taught them one important lesson: that animals are more sensitive to the signs of nature than they had ever realized, because they sensed the danger. And had people paid heed, perhaps more lives might have been saved.
We are observing animals, and we're trying to understand how animals react and what it is they react to. Once we understand this, we can develop an early warning system. Still, mankind will take a while to get there.
But we cannot simply rely on animals. We should analyze what animals are feeling, and then we should develop methods to measure and monitor their behavior. If large numbers of people were encouraged to look out for unusual animal behavior, if they noticed unusual behavior in pets or in wild animals, if they rang a special earthquake hotline or a tsunami hotline, then the warnings, I think, could be brought together by a computer. If there was a surge of calls from a particular region, this could suggest that something was going to happen there. So I think with the internet and with telephones, it would be very easy to set up an animal-based warning system, at least on a research basis.
I do know that there is a place in Job in the Bible where it says, to get the answers, you go ask the beast. They have all the answers.
We may not understand everything that happens just before a major earthquake, but we do know that if we were to listen to animals, perhaps we'd be one step closer to being prepared the next time disaster strikes.